Welcome to explanation of SandStar. SandStar lives inside a controller, and it's wrapped around pretty much within SkySpark. And there are a few applications that we use to define and control what SandStar does. So the first application that we have is called Record Editor. This basically, the whole purpose of this application is to control the ports, define the ports of a controller. This is pretty much done with every building automation system out there. What we do is we either go to a table, or when we add an analog input, we select what kind of input that is. Within SandStar, we basically do all of these by tags. And there is basically a library of tags that is already available within the system. These tags are defined by Graph Commons. This is basically makes it easier for us to suggest us tags. And there are other features within the record editor application. We will go through these one by one, but initially what we are doing is we are creating a video of explaining where things are. The second application that we have is basically EAC config. This is the area where you could basically set the IP settings. So the course tab is literally where the SandStar application is running and where you are connecting from. So you need to enter your IP address of your computer as well as where it is being served from. Those two IPs are entered here so that you can get record editor communicating to it. When we do localhost or 127.0.0.1, this actually is enough for the SandStar to communicate to SkySpark only within the same device. In the future, we will have an automated job process that will basically, after an hour of setting this up, it will send you an email, and it will also check and warn you that an IP setting is enabled, because this is basically required for security. We want to wrap up SandStar within the encapsulation of SkySpark. So the less ports open, less systems open to outside devices, the better it is for the device security. The second tab is Certificate Manager. So this Certificate Manager is basically to create certificates and install certificates to SkySpark. This is a setup that is built. This has not been extensively tested yet, so I would stay away from it for a while. But eventually we will have this improved, and you will be able to add it to the system. The second part is date and time. Within SandStar, within these EAC devices, we do have RTC clock. So you can basically set the NTP servers. You write the NTP server and you set it from here. And then we also have hardware clock, and then we can set and date and time. So once we set a date and time, you can synchronize it to the hardware clock, and you can see the hardware clock is read-only mode. This is basically, we write to the hardware clock, and on the boot time, it will basically read that hardware clock and restore it from the RTC clock. The third tab is device config. This is where we do the software abstraction of the Zinc file that gets loaded into SandStar. This is almost impossible to use within the sense of editing from here. So one of the ways that we use this is as such. So you can open a record editor. Let's say you made a mistake that is an extensive problem within the system. What we can do from here is that we can minimize this, and we can go here, export device schema, SandStar, copy clipboard, and copy and paste and save into here. When we copy and paste, make sure that you have a space at the end of the line. This is the end of line check that basically any zinc file has. This is encoded in zinc format, so if you have any issues that is beyond repairable, adding it one by one, you can actually copy the whole schema of the device in one swoop. Okay, we can go to the next application. The next application is device template. And device template is basically required for device abstraction. This is the device abstraction for this given device. There will be many other devices in the future. And what we are doing here is we have a channel. We are basically taking the channel, abstracting it to a hardware call within this device. The next tab is Ethernet. This is from here, we can set it from DHCP, we can set it to a static IP and things like that. The third tab is SandStar. From here, we can actually stop SandStar. We can log into the device. We can basically stop and look at the status of the runtime. So you can see some REST API watches being sent over. And you can also click on journal, and this will give us a pop-up window of more data. So if there's any error within SandStar application, we will basically be able to see this happening right from here. This gives us an easy way of debugging what is happening within the controller itself. System is basically related to system. You can restart Untitled. So what this means is that we can restart SkySpark application within there, and we call this as an OEM brand, we call this Untitled. We can restart the host, meaning that we can restart the whole database, or we can shut down the device. If you shut down, you have to go physically there to start the system back up. You have to do a power cycle. So be careful when you click on it. If you're in a remote location, there's no way to get it back up. We're literally shutting down the whole Linux operating system. Regenerate docs is basically within our application, we have documentation, and we will be improving this documentation. There's still a lot to do in here. And once this is basically done, you will see a documentation here. So what we have is when you have a documentation pod, when you first open it, what it will do is it will generate on the fly. So what you're seeing is it's right now waiting for it. What is happening behind is the SkySpark application is doing a docgen process underneath it. And once that is done, we will be able to see the documentations right within here. One of the things is that we can actually upload a pod, which could be a pod that contains documentation. If that is the case, then what would happen is the documentation would not be updated. So in order to update documentation, we would have to, once you see that it is generated now, and this is basically a fresh generated documentation. It is generated at 9:11 p.m. on 30th of August. And what we would have to do is, if we upload a new pod, we would have to regenerate documentation. And that system button is really required to have so that we can upload the documentation. So the next tab is system logs. This is basically, this is literally the logging feature of Linux. And this constantly writes to the disk, and it's not necessary unless there's a very problematic issue within the Linux system. So we give you the option to completely disable it. So we are lowering the tear on the EMC chip by doing this. And there's also clean button. So by any case, if something got stuck in logs and it started using a lot of your disk space, you can hit clean to clean the log area of the disk space. One of the last areas is update pods. So this literally installs, we can basically hit upload, and this will select you can select a file from here, which is a pod, and then you select it, you hit install, and it would basically install that updated pod. And this could be for any application, and this will install it within SkySpark's libfan folder. The last one is wireless. Wireless is a beta feature. It does work. It is available. So if I enable it, what you're going to see is the Wi-Fi within the region. You can actually just enter those Wi-Fi settings here. And this would basically be just like the Ethernet. It is in beta. It's built in. It should work fine, but it basically needs to be tested as well. So other than this, these are the features that are built in. There's also for visualization app called Visualytic. We are going to get into those later on. A different module than SandStar, but the main parts that are required for SandStar to run is record editor and EAC config, so you can actually control what is happening within the device. Thank you very much for listening for the first video that is generated for SandStar.